So today we're going to be talking about the integumentary system. This is primarily skin, hair, nails, and glands. I just want to point out before we get started on the notes that there are four main types of membranes that we have in our body. The first one being serous, which is going to line body cavities that lack openings to the outside. Mucus lines cavities and tubes that open to the outside of the body. Synovial is what we have in the inner linings of our joint cavities, and cutaneous membranes, which is skin. Okay, and we're going to highly focus in on the skin today, and we'll touch upon hair and nails and glands. Now, skin is a very high complex organ. It accounts for about 16% of the body weight of our body, and the whole integumentary system is about 1.5 to 2 meters squared in surface area, and that's quite a big portion of our body. Skin is separated into, again, it's a cutaneous membrane, and then hair, nails, and glands all are represented by what we call accessory structures. So this is the main picture that we see when we look at skin cross section. I want to point out that every square foot contains about 15 feet of blood vessels, 4 yards of nerves, and about 100 different oil or sebaceous glands. Now, skin is our protective covering. In an adult, it's about 15 square feet, and it weighs about 9 pounds, which is kind of crazy to think about. It has so many important functions. One of them is to help regulate body temperature. It's going to help retard or stop water loss from the deeper tissues. It is going to house sensory receptors. It's going to make various biochemicals. And it's going to excrete small quantities of waste. As far as the body temperature regulation goes, the blood reservoir in the dermis is very important for displacing heat. Okay, the sensory receptors, all right, that's going to detect touch, pressure, pain, temperature. Synthesizing various biochemicals is vitamin D3. It's going to store different nutrients. It can excrete water, salt, organic wastes. Okay. But again, we don't want to have that much water loss because our tissues do need the water. Now, there are different layers of our skin. The outermost layer is called the epidermis. Then we have the dermis, and then the subcutaneous or the hypodermis. Epidermis is actually a bunch of stratified squamous cells. Dermis is thicker. It's going to contain connective tissue, epithelial tissue, smooth muscle tissue, nervous tissue, and then the blood. And then the subcutaneous or the hypodermis, that is like the fat cells, lots of loose connective and adipose tissue. All right. Now, if you remember when we talked about stratified squamous epithelia, we always said it was protection. You have to remember that skin is continuously abused, degraded, exposed to environmental chemicals. And so it's constantly being sloughed off, and it often offers protection by microorganisms. So again, the epidermis is the outermost layer, the dermis is the inner layer, and then the hypodermis or subcutaneous layer is below all of that. So let's chat about the epidermis. This is the outermost layer. So it is what's going to provide the actual protection. It's going to keep things out of our body unless we have a cut or an incision, laceration, or so forth. The main cells that we have are called keratinocytes. These are different cells that are important in creating that waxy layer for that waterproof activity that we have in our cells. Now, when we talk about our skin, we have thick skin and thin skin. If you think about the palms of your hands or your soles of your feet, I would think that you would be able to notice that that's a much thicker area as opposed to the top of your hand, per se, or your arm. Okay. So thick skin has more layers. It is thicker. And you can see the difference there. This is not a slide that you have to write down. It's just more of an interesting fact to kind of understand. The majority of our body is covered by thin skin. And here you are, just be able to see the difference between thin and thick skin. Now, we have different layers of the epidermis, okay? They are called stratums, stratum corneum, stratum lucidium, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, stratum basal, all right? When this all happens, you can tell that the outermost layer is the stratum corneum. So a little acronym for you to remember this is Californians like girls in string bikinis. So California, corneum, lucidium like, granulosum is girls, string, spinosum, and basal is going to be the bikinis. Okay, so let's go through what all of these different layers are. The stratum corneum is the surface layer of the skin. It contains normally 15 to 30 layers of cells, and all of the cells are bound together tightly. And when they get removed or sloughed off, they kind of go in sheets. It is a dry layer and it is water resistant. Now, the stratum lucidium is about 1 to 3 layers. It is a clear layer and it is the extra layer that is found in thick skin. So it's only found in the palms and the soles. Okay. They have more flattened cells that have a lot of keratin in them. The stratum granulosum is called the grainy layer. This is about 3 to 5 cells thick. These cells start producing large quantities of keratin and keratin hyaline. Now, the keratin is a fibrous protein. Once it produced, the cells will die and dry out. Okay, the keratin hyaline forms the dense granules that make it the grainy layer, and that is what's going to promote the dehydration, causing those cells to die. Now, the stratum spinosum is the spiny layer. It's about 8 to 10 layers thick, and it contains what we call Langerhans cells. These are immune cells that help fight microbes that do get through the skin. And then the last layer is the stratum basal, which is often called the stratum germinative. It is about 2 to 3 layers thick, and it is the innermost layer. Okay. It is what's actually going to form our epidermal ridges that increase the surface area of our fingertips so that we can grab such and increase that friction. So it's actually going to create what we have as our fingerprint. The dermal projections are called dermal papillae, and they extend between those adjacent epidermal ridges. And they have stem cells, germinative cells, that will often divide to replace the ones that are dying off. So you can see the different layers. The stratum corneum is the outermost layer of protection. Lucidium is only found in the thick skin. Granulosum is the grainy layer where we have the cells starting to die off. Stratum spinosum is the spiny ones, and those are the cells that are going to help with some protection from invaders. And the basal layer, the germinativum, is going to be the ones that are going to start growing the new cells. There's a process called keratinization. This is the formation of the protective super layers of cells that are filled with keratin. And this is going to occur on all skin surfaces. The keratin is what's going to give skin its rough, leathery texture and that waterproof quality. Now, it takes about 15 to 30 days for a cell to start off at the stratum basal or stratum germinative, sorry guys, layer to get to the corneum. So it's almost a month. And it does take about 2 weeks for those dead cells to be shed from that stratum corneum. All right, so you can see that there's a lot of different layers, and the cells do move up through the layers and they get sloughed off. And again, the top layers, a lot of tight cells, so they get shed in sheets. Now, skin can be different colors, and that's all based on the pigment composition and blood supply. So, carotene is a pigment, orange yellow, that will accumulate in the stratum corneum. And then it also can be in the dermis layer. And then the melanin is the brown, yellow, brown, black pigment, which is found in the bottom layer. This is going to be made, the melanin is made from the amino acid tyrosine, just a little fun fact. And it will protect your epidermis and dermis from the UV radiation. All right, the carotene can be converted to vitamin A, but it does need some other help with that. Now, with the blood supply, the red blood cell has hemoglobin in it. When the hemoglobin binds to oxygen, it turns bright red. Okay. When you get inflamed, it typically is red because it's more pronounced because all of those vessels are dilated. Right. So if you are turning pale or white or bluish, that means you're not getting the oxygen that you need. So skin color is based on pigments, carotene, and melanin, and then the blood supply. That was all about the epidermis. So now we're going to talk about the dermis, that middle layer. So we have a papillary layer and we have a reticular layer. The papillary layer is the superficial layer. It's made up of that areolar tissue, and it does contain blood vessels and nerves. Now, the reticular layer is made up of reticular tissue, and it's bound to the papillary layer with collagen fibers. Now, the boundary is indistinct because the fibers extend into the deeper tissue. The dermis is what's going to house the pain receptors. It's going to help hold the water, helps our skin keep moist. And again, the dermis is that middle layer. Now, we do have different fibers in our skin. So, collagen is going to allow the skin to bend and twist, and then the elastin stretches and then rebounds. Now, they are intertwined together, okay? And then water is going to help with all of that together. Now, the subcutaneous layer or the hypodermis consists of the adipose tissue and blood vessels. They often have the collagen and elastic fibers that are in the dermis, and they kind of go continuous into this layer, but it's pretty much the insulating factor of our body. We're now going to move on to the accessory structures. We have hair follicles and glands and nails. Okay, so fun fact, you don't have to write this down. There's about 5 million hairs on the human body. Most of it is on our head. We don't have it on our feet, our palms, sides of the fingers, toes, lips, nipples, and so forth. Again, this is fun facts, and this is non living. Now, the hair structure is very simple to look at. And to me, I want to explain it like a pencil. So if you look at this diagram, you can see that we have a cuticle, which is the outer covering of the cell. That would be like the yellow of a pencil. There's actually a pattern, and we have what we call an imbricate pattern, very different than a dog or a cat hair. Okay. Then we have the cortex, which has the different pigments. And then we have the medulla. Now, the medulla might not always be present in hair, and it is a darker line, and that would be like the lead that you would write with. Okay. Now, when you look at the anatomy of the skin cell, you can see that there's a follicle. This is where the hair grows. Okay. You can see that there's a shaft. That's the actual hair. They have this cool thing. The erector pili muscle is what makes the hair stand up. And you can notice that it is connected to sebaceous glands, which will eventually make your hair oily if you don't wash it. And also it's blood supply. So anything that travels through your blood will go through your hair. So follicles where the hair grows. The hair papilla is located at the base of the follicle, and that's what contains those blood vessels that helps nourish the hair. And then it does have harder cells. It's a harder form of keratin, but it still is the protein. And I did review the cuticle, the inner cortex, and then the innermost medulla, which is the darker line. So hair is basically for protection, keeping us warm, insulating us, and so forth. Um, this is not a slide for you to write down. It's just kind of an informational slide for you to do. I do want to point out as pigment production will decrease with age, your hair will get lighter. And then when you get white hair, it's because of there's actually air bubbles in the hair shaft, and there's obviously no pigment. The rector pili, that's what I had mentioned, attaches to the hair follicle. It's a muscle that was going to help make the hair stand on end. We have two major types of hair. We have vellus hairs, or the baby hairs. This is called the peach fuzz. And then we have terminal hairs. These are the head hairs, eyebrows, eyelashes, and then when you get puberty, your armpit, your groins, and your limbs. So vellus is like the baby hairs, and then the terminal hairs are adult hairs. All right. Glands. We had talked a little bit about glands when we talked about tissues. There's two main types that we're going to talk about. We have sebaceous glands, which are often called holocrine glands. This is what's going to produce the liquid, the oil, sebum, that's going to coat the hair shaft. And when you don't wash your hair, it looks like you're greasy. Okay. When the erector pili muscles contract, that actually forces the oil or the sebum onto the surface of the skin. And the sebum, if you can see, is a mixture of fat, triglycerides, cholesterol, proteins, and electrolytes. Okay. Sweat glands. This is pretty much, there's different types of glands that produce the sweat. The apical glands are the armpit and the groin, and they are going to secrete their products into that hair follicle also. It's going to produce that sticky, cloudy, stinky smell that we get. It is a good source of bacteria, and it is typical when people are going through puberty. The acrin is what's going to be producing the sweat. And that's mostly in the palms, the soles have the most, and we're going to do a little lab that shows us that. Sweat is mostly water. It's about 99% water. And it does contain salt. All right. And it is something that's very natural for us to secrete. We also have mammary glands, and we have the ceruminous glands. The mammary glands are located obviously in the breasts, and they will have milk when a woman gives birth. And the ceruminous glands are modified sweat glands. And this is in our ear canal, and that's what gives us our earwax, or the cerumen. Our last accessory structure to talk about is the nails. The nails are again for protection, very useful in helping as tools. They have hard keratin. The visible part of the nail is called the nail body. The part that you would cut is the free edge. The nail bed is under the nail body. The lunula is a white crescent that you get on your nail. I don't have them to show, but you can see that they're at the base of your nail, near where your cuticle is. The cuticle is the portion of the skin that grows onto the nail body, and people who get manicures, they do cut them off. Okay, and you can see all of the different parts of the nail. So that is the integumentary system. If you have any questions, please write them down. Let me know. Email me. Ask me in class tomorrow. This is just kind of going through our feedback mechanism with controlling the body heat. And we've kind of chatted about this a little bit, but we will start off talking about how our body does help with regulating the body temperature with the blood pressure, the blood vessel response. We're also going to do an activity with different wounds, but this is all different things that are happening. And then we're going to move on to the muscular system. So if you have any questions, please let me know.